Okay, today we're going to be talking about retrospectives. This is a bit more than an agile nudge because I'd like to talk all the way through the way I run a retrospective. Actually, if you look on YouTube, you'll see the way typically I run a sprint planning and sprint review, and I never did the retrospective one, which is strange because that's the most important of the 4 events in Scrum. So, I'm just going to quickly go to the agenda of what a retrospective will be, and I'll dig into what each one of these means. The power start, the purpose, outcome, what's in it for me, engagement and roles. So the purpose of a retrospective is for the team to inspect and adapt the way they worked, to gather data and generate insights, and out of it have some elements of improvement that we can take into the next sprint. The outcome will be those items of improvement, and that should help the team feel a sense of progress. And in the spirit of Kaizen, it's not true Kaizen, but in the spirit that we can continually improve the way the team works. So it's an active workshop session with a team. It's facilitated by the Scrum Master or by the facilitator. Okay, so usually then the first thing I do is a check-in round. The reason we do this is to build site safety. It encourages each person to speak at least once. The research shows that if you speak once in a meeting, you're more likely to speak more often. So just before we ran this video, I went around the room and said, one word, what are you feeling? And you went excited, intrigued, let's get going, and all those things. And it just meant all of you spoke. Then the most important thing, what did we agree in the last retrospective? Did we actually do it? And if we didn't, let's capture it on here. If we did, let's celebrate it. But make a note of reminding ourselves of the last retrospective. Of course, during the sprint, you should have done that in every daily Scrum. Then set the scene. Now, what we do here is to ask, how did the sprint go? Again, this could be a check-in round. In one word, what did the sprint feel like for you? Successful, frustrating, irritating, boring, whatever it was, it just sets the scene. Now, then what we do is we gather data, we sort the data, we find a way to converge the data back. From that, we generate insights, we discuss, then from that, we create an action list, and then we wrap. And we try and have at least one, and probably 2 or 3 things that we can improve upon. And finally, no retrospective is complete without a retrospective of the retrospective, which we'll cover later. Here's the thing, now this is in the SoftEd training material. I'd never heard of this until I started delivering the SoftEd training. The language I'm not quite certain about, but you can go to retrospectives.com and this is here. I'm just going to read this out to you now. Regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills, their abilities, and the available resources, and the situation at hand. Really, this is just setting the scene to say, it's okay if we screwed up. In fact, let's be open and honest if we have problems. So I've very rarely used this. It might be something we might want to try as a laminated card. I would probably change the language. There's lots of theys in there, and I'd probably put we's in. But it's called a retrospective prime directive. There's 2 people as well to refer to, Ainsley Nies and Esther Derby. They've got a book, Agile Retrospectives. I think we've got a copy here that we're sharing around. It's really worth looking into that. It will delve in detail into what I'm talking about here, and it will also give you tips and tricks and specific techniques that you can use. So, this figure of 8 diagram here, think of everything as cyclical, it's iterative, which means we always return back at the end of the sprint. We've got the sprint itself, and we've got the retro. Of course, we know in a sprint, we incorporate our improvements, we build the product, and then we ship, potentially. But it's this bit here, and this really goes back into that agenda there. Firstly, we set the scene, then we gather the data, then we generate insights, then we make a decision of a course of action, and then we close it off with that retrospective. Let's go to setting the scene first. What I've got in here is what a board would look like after I've run a retrospective, and usually with brand new teams, I run the same format every time. It makes life easier for me because I don't have to think about it. It reduces cognitive load. And I've done this hundreds of times. I think I counted last week at probably 170, 180 retrospectives I've done. So you'd always have the agenda. You'd ideally have a clock. Make sure you keep on top of the time. The first thing is to give the power start, check in, then we go to setting the scene. Now, my go-to technique for this is called the mood graph, or the moodometer. And what we have is each team member comes up with a marker pen and they say, well, if you think if there's a happy face here and a grumpy face there, you know, the sprint started off quite well, but then we had a problem, but then we fixed it and things were good, and then I felt ill. and you see highs and lows, and you get each team member to go around. That will take about 10 or 15 minutes if you've got a team of 6 plus or minus 3. I know here in Freedom, there's a few blended teams, so there's like 15 people. I believe that's too many, and I think I'm going to encourage that we split that up, so you go back to your core Scrum team. The interesting thing is here, this first thing, it brings back to your short-term memory what went on in the last 2 weeks. So, oh yeah, the build broke, and that reminds other people. So it starts cueing each other and priming the brain and reminding ourselves. But also we can look at a few trends which usually happen. There's often a dip here, and it often ends up in a high. And so we can talk through, well, if everyone else is happy here and this guy is sad, what does that mean? What was happening to this person? Did we know this? So it can generate insights about each other's interpersonal relationships. It's also a good way to show vulnerability. You have to speak out of how you feel to everybody else, so it helps to connect the team together. So I would spend about 15 minutes on that. That is really powerful. It's worth doing that and doing it properly, because then that will set the scene to go on to the next thing, gathering the data. There's lots of different techniques we can use here. I've got more, less, start, stop. You could have what went well, what didn't go well. You could have what I loved, I learned, and I loathed. There's all of these different techniques. My favourite actually is what we want to do more of, less of, what we want to start or what we want to stop. Or alternatively, actually this is my favourite, what went well, what didn't go well, any ideas, and thanks. So we then have 3 minutes silent brainstorming. The reason we do silent brainstorming is, although we've anchored already and framed the mind, what we want is for people to have unique insights and intuition that will then have divergent data. So we should have a large spread of different ideas coming out. What went well? So we have post-it notes, we put them on the wall, and people talk through all of the good things in the sprint. This gives us a positive sense of progress and achievement. There's always good things, you can always think of positive things. So I don't spend too much time on this, we just get everyone talking again, being really open and frank about what went well. This is the meat. This is what we spend most of our time on. Didn't go well. Within this, depending on how many people you've got, and depending on how many tickets you got, I mean, if everyone only writes 2 tickets and there's only half a dozen or whatever, it's probably not worth doing this. But you could do the Adkins 6, or at this point now, you've probably been sat down for 30 minutes. So you might want to get everybody up and bubble sort. So you group them together. So we're now getting into sorting straight away. We've gathered the data and we've sorted. We may have 4, maybe 5 different subject matters. You've been going half an hour, so you've got an hour left at this point. So as facilitator, you say, right, this first item, let's talk through it. And then you start asking questions. What happened? Who'd like to talk through this? What does this mean? What could we do about this? What other things is there? And what else? You'll notice all of those questions have what in them. And what we're trying to do is not have a bitch and moan fest about how awful everyone else is and how great we would be if everyone just got out of the way. It's about what impediments we had and what we can do about it. We can't change the world, but we can change our attitude and response to it. So out of what didn't go well, what I'm trying to tease out is what could we do differently? What one thing could we do in the next sprint which would make life slightly easier? And then so I'm just there as a facilitator trying to paraphrase what people said. Often, and again with your team last week, Laura, I was actually spoon feeding in a few ideas. Mm-hmm. So I think it is okay to be a bit of a coach and say, hey, it sounds like you might want to try some swarming, mm-hmm. or have you considered slicing differently? So we get a few things out of what didn't go well. This I would spend a good half hour. It could actually spill out into 45 minutes. If you've got quite a few things and you're spending 10 minutes on each, that's most of the retrospective. That's why we're here. That's the whole purpose of this. All of this is to build up to this. And then we should get, at the end of that, the success. We're almost done at that point. We've actually achieved the main aim, but there's 2 or 3 more things we want to do to finish off. Second thing is ideas. When you bring in out what didn't go well, you might have an insight of an idea. So let's capture this here. Hopefully, all of these ideas align with all of these things here, but you never know, there could be another idea. Why don't we don't seem to trust each other, why don't we go for a team lunch once every sprint or something? It's just things that are going to help us. And finally, thanks. It's important for us to connect as human beings and thank each other and be generous with each other and be thankful. So my party trick here, I'll take in all the tickets of thanks. I'll say, thank Anusha for this. So I'll put it down face down. Oh, thank Chris for that. And we'll just go around the table, and Chris, you'll go, oh, what have I got here? Well, this is embarrassing. Thanks, Chris, for... And it was from Jenny, so then Jenny, you have to ask Chris. Thank Chris. And it's just a nice feeling to end with. Then, almost finished, nearly 90 minutes. We've agreed the action. What I would do then as a facilitator is talk through the mood graph, talk through the high level, the key points we took away from here, talk about what went well, talk about what we agreed from what didn't go well, and finally, then wrap it up. Now you can ask the elevator meeting as a retrospective. You've heard of the elevator pitch, but I like the elevator meeting. You've been in a meeting, you haven't said anything, and then you go outside, you go in the elevator and went, well, that was a bloody waste of time, wasn't it? Or you said, well, no one listened to me. You actually challenge people to say, what will you be saying in the elevator? Hopefully you've built trust, and you can do that. If you haven't, well, at the next meeting you can say, what did you say in the elevator? Or if somebody comes to you later on to say, hey, no one spoke about this, say, well, challenge them, why didn't you speak about this in your elevator meeting? Have one way, there's many different ways of running the retrospective. As a leader, you want to seek feedback, because that makes it much easier than to give feedback. And we want to continually improve the process. I want to go back to this here, the inputs into a retrospective. We need the trust. We need to build the trust over time. That doesn't happen overnight. We need to build psych safety. We want to feel safe that we can call things out, which is the purpose of this here. But just these words won't help. It needs to take time. And we need equal airtime. So as a facilitator, you need to make sure that the quiet people are talking, and the noisy people you suppress, and you can use hand signals. People need to feel a sense of progress. They need to feel that retrospectives actually matter and they make a difference. We need real data. We need to gather what actually happens. We need to be honest. And we need to be dissatisfied. We can't rest on our laurels. Every sprint, there's something we can do to improve. So we have to have that mindset, the innovator's mindset of being dissatisfied. Finally, pro tips. Prep, prep, prep. Don't, as a Scrum Master, just rock up to a sprint retrospective. Spend at least 15 minutes before. So bear in mind, when you book in the room, book half an hour before, so you can do what I did, which is to get the whiteboard ready. Preparation is key. If you've got any conflicts within the team, have one-on-ones with people. If people bring things to you, say, good point, raise it at the retrospective, and be ready for it. You are able to bias this and start feeding things in, and get people to speak up at the retrospective when everybody's present. And finally, be consistent, but be novel. So that format that I showed you there, I would probably do for 4 to 5 sprints with a brand new team that I've been working with. Then I would start changing it. I wouldn't change it after anything less than 5 sprints because it's too mixy-matchy. But then when I do change it, I would only change it slightly. And I've heard of teams who did this for a few sprints and then they didn't do it and then they said bring it back. So you can bring things back, but you want to bring a bit of novelty as well to keep it interesting so it doesn't become stale. And if you read this book, Agile Retrospectives by Esther Derby, that's going on YouTube, she's going to shout, then there's so many tips on there. I hope that was useful. Thank you.